I'm Ryan O'Dowd, and you're listening to Ryan's Audiobooks on the Issues Magazine YouTube channel. Today we continue with Section 6.9, Prometheus Rising, by Robert Anton Wilson. We're picking up at the beginning of Chapter 5. Dickens and Joyce, the two-circuit dialectic. That why all parks up excited about his gun fodder. That why crazy Aztecs and crime ministers preaching him mornings. James Joyce, from Finnegan's Wake. The gracious goddess and the terrifying giant haunt our legends and our literature. Hearsay and paradox lust. James Joyce, from Finnegan's Wake. The shock and dismay of the infant when the harshness of traditional toilet training introduces the anal patrist continuum is conveyed with great artistry in Dickens' David Copperfield. So overt is this sequence indeed, that it's hard to believe it was actually written half a century before Freud's clinical writings. Dickens describes an idyllic infanthood in which David lives with a widowed mother, who can safely be characterized as a human embodiment of the bona dea, good goddess, of the ancients, who lingers still as the fairy godmother in children's tales. Onto this happy scene intrudes the horrible stepfather, Mr. Murdstone, whose Jehovah complex makes him an avatar of the punishing Father God. There's no way of obeying all of Murdstone's rules. There are too many of them, and they are mostly unstated and implicit anyway. David undergoes some monumental lashings on the buttocks, for his own good, of course, although Dickens emphasizes in a quite Freudian way the obvious enjoyment Murdstone obtains from these sessions. Quite naturally, David begins to internalize this anal system of values and imagines he is quite a guilty little wretch and richly deserves this torture. Then Dickens inserts the following scene when David returns from a year at school. I went in with a quiet, timid step. God knows how infantile the memory may have been that was awakened in me at the sound of my mother's voice in the old parlor when I set foot in the hall. I think I must have laid in her arms and heard her singing to me when I was but a baby. The strain was new to me, but it was so old that it filled my heart brimful like a friend come back from a long absence. I believed from the solitary and thoughtful way in which my mother murmured her song that she was alone, and I went softly into the room. She was sitting by the fire, suckling an infant whose tiny hand she held against her neck. Her eyes were looking down upon its face, and she sat singing to it. I was so far right that she had no other companion. I spoke to her, and she started and cried out. But seeing me, she called me her dear Davy, her own boy, and coming halfway across the room to meet me, kneeled down upon the ground and kissed me, and laid my head down on her bosom near the little creature that was nestling there, and put its hand to my lips. I wish I had died. I wish I had died then. With my feeling in my heart, I should have been more fit for heaven than I have ever been since. The dream of return to oral biosecurity is too overt to require commentary. Similarly, in Joyce's monumental novel of the mind of a man asleep, Finnegan's Wake, the father and the father god are always associated with war and excretion, as Joyce scholar William York Tyndall has noted. As Gun the Farther, the terrifying anal monster combines pistol deity and flatulence. As Delude of Israel, he is the jealous territorial Old Testament lord of hosts, i.e. of battles. His insignia, the 100-letter thunder word which recurs 10 times in the dream, always combines fatherhood, menace, defecation, and war. For instance, in its first appearance on page 1, it is Baba balagara gaktam minaranakaran brantaner antun thuntraran harhaskan tuhuhunden thurnuk. Here we find Baba, phonetic Abba, Hebrew father, phonetic Cabron, the general who so appropriately said merde when asked to surrender the territory, phonetic Gaelic scan, crack, a thunder of the anus, Uranen, Germanic excretion, the suggestive orden implying both Germanic medal for valor and English ordure, etc. The terrifying Father God elsewhere makes his maneuvers in open order, and preaches all the anal authoritarian values. No gods before me, thou shalt not commit idolatry, love my label like myself. He's the villain of the garden potty, the trickster god who set the baited trap in the Garden of Eden, the ego internalized in toilet training, potty, the god of thunder and wrath, Godin. Fleeing him, the inhabitants of the earth always seek his opposite, Alp, German dream, also the root of the first letters of the Greek and Hebrew alphabets, Aleph and Alpha, the source, the beginning, Ana Leva Plurabella, When her name is written in full, the waters of life combined with all beautiful women. She's as oral and loving as omnibus is anal and threatening. With a beak, with a spring, all her rill ringlets shaking, rock drops in her tacky, tram tokens in her air, all wave to a point, and then all inundation, a little old-fashioned mummy, little wonderful mummy ducking under bridges, as happy as the day is wet, babbling, bubbling, chattering to herself, deludering the fields. The amniotic river woman is the perfect mother of infantile dream memory and the great goddess of the ancients, the ideal biosurvival safe, warm place, and to her Joyce offers his most fervent prayer. In the name of Anna, the Almeizafolia, ever living, the bringer of plurabilities. Hailed be her eve, her sing-time sung, her will be run unhemmed as it is uneven. Humanity in Joyce's view, as in Rattray Taylor's, is forever leaving her to follow the hero father to the bloodal filth of Waterloo. Battlefield of Waterloo with blood and excrement superimposed to reveal the anal territorial roots of war, and then returning temporarily chastened to list as she bibs us by the waters of Babylon. In Chapter 3 of Finnegan's Wake, the offenders, invaders, and defenders natives get so thoroughly mixed up that all that remains is a composite fender who takes the blame for everybody. This cyclical view of history, whether in Joyce, Rattray Taylor, Vico, Joyce's source, Hegel and Marx, etc., is only part of the truth, but it needs to be stressed because it is part that most people fearfully refuse to recognize. Whether we speak in terms of Taylor's matris-patris dialectic, Vico's cycle of the divine, heroic and urbanized ages, the Marx-Hegel trinity of thesis, antithesis, synthesis, or any variation thereon, we are speaking of a pattern that is real and that does repeat. But it only does so to the extent that people are robotized, trapped in hardwire reflexes. When the accumulated facts, gimmicks, tools, techniques, and gadgets of neuroscience, the science of brain change and brain liberation, reaches a certain critical mass, we all will be able to free ourselves from these robot cycles. It is the thesis of this book that we have been approaching that critical mass for several decades now, and will reach the crossover point faster than you would expect. The current rampages of territorial emotional pugnacity sweeping this planet are not just another civilization falling, Vico fashion. They are the birth pangs of a cosmic Prometheus rising out of the long nightmare of domesticated primate history. Of course, these are genetic historical generalizations which do not precisely match any specific family. The gracious goddess hostile giant archetypes are not activated in cases where the mother is cold, rejecting, embittered, etc., and the father is warm, supportive figure. The imprints on the first and second circuits are statistically deviant, and such families in anything may result. A shaman, a schizophrenic, a genius, a homosexual, an artist, a psychologist, etc. Exercise. In terms of the theory so far developed, analyze the following characters. 1. Scarlett O'Hare. 2. King Kong. 3. Odysseus. 4. Hamlet. 5. A Bugs Bunny. 6. A Portnoy. 7. Leopold Bloom. 8. Richard M. Nixon. 9. Thomas Jefferson. 10. St. Paul. 11. Donald Duck. 12. Iago. 13. Jane Eyre. 14. Joseph Stalin. 15. Joan of Arc. 16. Timothy Leary. 17. Aleister Crowley. 18. The Author. 19. Mao. 20. Carl Jung. 21. The Secret Chiefs. 22. Hannibal Lecter, M.D. And finally, 23. You. Thus concludes Chapter 5, the Dickens and Joyce Two-Circuit Dialectic. Section 6.9. Tomorrow we will continue with Section 6.10, Chapter 6, the Time-Bending Semantic Circuit. I will see you then. Alam.